So recently, the shaila has come up again a number of times from people. They move into new apartments, and many of the apartments that you and like to move into obviously are not l'chatchila made as kosher kitchens. So there's a number of shailas: counter space, ovens, the sink. It only has one sink. I mean, Klal Yisrael always, when sinks were invented, in most cases they never had two sinks. I remember as a child, I think I grew up until the kitchen was redone, we had only one sink. So the shaila always is, how do we deal with one sink, b'negei milchiks and fleishiks? Likewise, some sinks are double sinks, not for kashrus purposes, but they obviously to have more space, so they have two different sinks, two different drains, but one faucet. So how do we deal with the fact that they're connected with milchiks and fleishiks? So bekitzer, let's start with the more difficult shaila, which is if you have only one sink. If you have only one sink, you need to assume that that sink is be'etzem treif. Now, that doesn't mean any time you'll use the sink, the food will become treif for a number of reasons, but you have to assume that it's spritzed over milchiks, it's spritzed over fleishiks, because it's a sink and we drain things there, and therefore the sink is treif. So as a klal, when you have only one sink, b'derech klal, you should never use very hot water when you're washing the dishes. B'chlal, you should never use hot water, very hot water, even if you have two sinks, just in case you might make a mistake, milchiks and fleishiks, and even the shikses that might be in the house should be trained not to use very hot water, which means the water should never reach a level that you would need gloves or that you can't actually wash the dishes with your hands open. Which means that don't lechatchila put the sink on max, wait 5 minutes, and then come back and lower the temperature, because by that time you might have already caused the problem with any dishes that are inside, potentially. So the lechatchila should never be very hot. And like that, at least, even if the sink take became treif for fleishik, because you once poured out hot chicken soup into the sink, which is definitely hot in Eiduk L'Rishon, but at least now when you're washing the dishes, it's not going to make your dishes treif. That's number one. Number two, you should have two racks. They sell racks that you could put on bottom of the sink. You could have one for milchiks and one for fleishiks. That therefore, when you put the dishes down, it never falls down and touches the sink. That's not foolproof. You can't say, okay, imkain, let me use very hot water, because b'derech klal, when you wash dishes and his mamoshes, that goes into the drain and it clogs and it starts to fill up. So you still have a problem. But at least in most cases, or in many cases, the dishes won't be touching the actual walls of the sink. So you need to have two separate racks. Whenever you're washing milchiks or fleishik dishes, you put down the rack, which means that the disposable place for your dishes is not lechatchila in the sink, because then you have to put the right rack, keep the sink empty, keep your dishes somewhere else, unless you're right now washing them. Put the rack in, put the dishes down, and then clean them with non-yatzeh ladis water. That is the best way to go about it. Now, b'di'evet, if, for example, you used very hot water, in many cases, it won't aser b'di'evet. Number one, lav dafke, the sink is a ben yoimoi, from today, milchiks and fleishiks. And ben yoimoi with milchiks and fleishiks does have other protein from when you count the ben yoimoi, so that would need to be discussed if it's a suffix. Number two, in many cases, soap is used. And if soap is used, there was nice and tamalif gam. So be'emes b'di'evet al kloponim, the sink never really became treif. So therefore, there are ways around it. But that's the best way to do it. Although this is all b'shasat chak, but that's life. You only have one sink. The issue with two sinks is a lesser issue, because the chayda, you can designate one sink for milchik, one sink for fleishik. The only shaila would be really on the faucet. So, for example, if you put a hot chicken soup down, that's steam, zayas going up, and it goes into the faucet, now the faucet became fleishik. And if the same thing would happen with milchik, it could possibly take out tam and aser. But the chances are that usually there's no zaya as much, let's say, from milchik, even if you put something, unless you push it cooked milk and you put a hot boiling pot of milk in the sink. But that klal is lav dafke going to be zaya, going siphon the milchik and siphon the fleishik into the faucet ad kedei kach to aser b'di'evet. But you need to be mindful of that. Especially many of the sinks today have longer pieces, so lav dafke the zaya would even go up, unless the old ones that were like this. I don't know how to describe that. But there's another whole shaila. The shaila is, since they're made of metal, so it's a shaila of cham b'ktsosei cham kulei. It's a huge machloikis. If by metal, if one side became hot, if the other side also absorbs tam. It's not in the scope of this conversation, but there are many poskim that will say that even if the other side didn't become hot, because there's a connection between metal of one end to the other end, that eventually it will become hot, so the chatchila the bliya will go bekule. Some say, even so, we don't say cham kule. Some will argue that the whole machloikis is only if it's cold, but if it indeed became hot, l'choladeis you say cham kule. It's not so clear from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Pesach Tov Nun Aleph how he views cham kule. In the sense, did the other side actually become hot or not? You could be medayik actually both ways. So therefore, certainly b'shas adchak there's a lot of more room to be mekel, because b'shas adchak we don't say cham miksa say cham kulei, and many poskim say even if the other side became hot, you don't say cham miksa say cham kulei, especially if the other side didn't become hot. I know I'm mentioning a lot of nekudos, so therefore it's a lot more lenient, more lekuladik akalponim b'di'evet. But lechatchila, because of all these shittas of cham miksa say cham kulei, so therefore it is kedai to do the same thing lechatchila, to not use very hot water. Even when you have a double sink, two sides, you don't have to have two racks, because you designate one for milchiks and one for fleishiks, but not to use very hot water even when you have two sinks. I just want to mention that many sinks have a dishwasher on the side of the sink, and the drain of the dishwasher gets connected to one of the drains. So make sure that whatever the dishwasher is, that drain is connected to the drain in the sink. Fleishik to the fleishik, milchiks to the milchik. Because I've had situations that, for whatever reason, they connected the fleishik dishwasher to the milchik sink. And many times it could happen that it backs up, and basically you have fleishiks backing up in your milchik sink.